Welcome to the Healthy Christian Leader. I'm Dwight Habermehl. Come join me in the living room for some honest conversations. I'll be talking to guests about their journey with Christ through the joys, the challenges, and the messiness of leadership. There's always something to learn from someone's story, so let's get started. Well, friends, welcome to the Healthy Christian Leader. I'm Dwight Habermehl, and I have a guest today you are going to so enjoy, Dr. Laurel Buckingham from Moncton, New Brunswick. He pastored Moncton Wesleyan Church for how many years? Decades. How many decades?
Well, I pastored the church for 45 years, but they made me pastor emeritus, so I have been a pastor there for 55 years.
Oh my, that's amazing.
I've been pastoring for 65 years, so.
Isn't that incredible?
Hopefully I've learned something.
I'm sure you have, and that's exactly why we're all looking forward to hearing the conversation today. And you have pastored Moncton Wesleyan for all that time. My goodness, what helped you stay rooted in one place for so long?
Well, I would say one of my decision makers has been a stewardship decision. Where can I get the greatest return on the investment? How can I get the greatest return on the investment? To be a good steward of my calling, my relationship with the Lord, and a good steward of my time. And so before I came to Moncton, I pastored a church in a small community of 700 people. And we saw the church grow in a wonderful way. When I first went there, we were in the 50s, and I ended up almost 300 in that little town. But saturation happened. And so I had to be able to find a place where I could see unlimited possibilities. And that's part of what caused me to end up in Moncton.
Wow. That
I
is
don't know if that answers the question, but
it's vision you're talking about. You had a vision of kingdom impact, is what I'm hearing, and
it
I sustained
will say this, for whatever reasons, that vision was so hot with me, and it still is. Sometimes it's the fire is burning so strongly. I wish it would just cool off a little bit, at the stage of the game. But it seems to intensify with the passing of time.
Now, the unique part, one of the unique things about your grace is evangelist would be mixed in there, would it not? Now, I'm standing from the background, but the proclamation of the gospel just burns in your hearts.
Well, yes, no question. And of course, people thought I should be an evangelist back in those days, but I didn't feel called that way, even though I did a lot of evangelistic meetings, even as a pastor in other places. But yeah, the whole thing, to boil it down, is to be in harmony with what Jesus died on the cross for, to keep that before our people all the time. This is number one. This is the most important thing of all, to see people come to know Jesus. Now, some people say, well, you're just interested in getting them saved. You're not interested in making disciples. Well, if you want to see more people saved, you've got to be interested in making disciples, because they can reproduce and bring others to Christ if they can be discipled and get developed spiritually. And so that was a major factor for us.
Now, that's a significant amount of time. Was there ever a time when you were feeling like you'd like to throw in the towel, where you were discouraged and tempted to leave for other opportunities?
No question about that. Too many times to count. However, when I first arrived here, I read a book by Elmer Towns that said of the 10 largest churches in North America, they were pastored by people who've been there for an average of 26 years. I remember thinking, 26 years? Who in the world can stay someplace for 26 years? That's nuts. But I ended up being here for 45 years as a lead pastor. But there were times when our church was an old church when I came here. it was somewhat legalistic, not extreme, but somewhat certainly extremely traditional. Been pretty much the same size for 100 years. And we were located downtown, and had no property except what the church sat on, not even a parking place, not one.
Mm.
And so as things began to go forward, of course, we had to find other places to put the people and all of that, and then we relocated. Well, when there's change that people are not used to, oh my, the pushback and the polarization that can happen. And we truthfully, and this is, I think it's important for people to get this, we were severely polarized. Now, the polarized people opposed were a minority. And the thing that was killing me is the crossfire between the people who are for and the people who are against was killing people in between that weren't a part of the problem or the solution. And so those were extremely difficult days when I wanted to be anywhere else except here. But I just saw, I knew the opportunity was here, the possibilities were here. And I've often said, if it weren't for pastors moving all the time, U-Haul would go out of business. And so much gets lost. There's so much value in a long-term ministry because you will do things as a leader when you know you're going to be there down the road to reap the results of making some tough decisions ahead of the fact and maybe controversial decisions. But you know, if this can fly, you're going to see down the road, maybe years from now, great results come from it. And so you'll make decisions, you will do things you wouldn't do if it was just a short-term ministry.
Now, Laurel, this isn't in the questions that I forwarded to you, but I kind of get the impression you're pretty good with going off the cuff.
I don't even know what the questions were.
So, Laurel, in those earlier days when you were making transition, because you've always got people who are rooted in the past, it's part of human nature. And sometimes for leaders, it's hard to tell what is the nature of humanity and the way that we respond to things as people, and how we are affected by change, and what might be spiritual warfare. Can you speak to that on any level? Like, was there any sense in your looking back?
I don't know whether this properly answers the question or not, but there's what helped me was to figure out the different temperaments and the different types of people and the value of those different types of people. And so I've kind of broke them down into 4 different types. You've got the radicals, you've got the progressives, you've got the conservatives, and you've got the traditionalists. And they all have to be treated differently. Now, the radicals, I love them because they're just ready to jump at anything I proposed, but then sometimes they're here today and gone tomorrow. You couldn't always depend on it. The progressives probably were the people that I was most aligned with because they're probably where I was in my thinking, and so they were easy to lead. Then the conservatives, and sometimes people see the conservatives as people who are slow and opposed and negative and all of that. But if we can sit down and have the patience with the conservative type and explain to them carefully and thoroughly and freely what it's all about that we're proposing, they will get on board and they will be our greatest, most dependable supporters. Mm-hmm. And then you have the traditionalists, and I've broken the traditionalists down into 3 types. You've got the traditionalists that says, I'm out of here, I don't like this, and they're gone. And then you've got the traditionalists that doesn't want to rock the boat, but they really don't like the changes, but they're going to stick by you. And then I've often said, then you've got the traditionalist that says, I was here today, I was here before you came, I'll be here after you're gone, I'm going to fight you until I die. Well, I outlived them all.
No, that's a great response. How did you keep your vision fresh year after year while leading in the same congregation so many years?
Well, that's a great question. A leader has truly got to be a learner. And I have to work harder at learning at this stage in my life, even than when I first began, because I have got a double whammy now. I got to unlearn the things that no longer work in today's world, in today's culture, and find out what speaks the language of the culture of the day without compromising with the culture, but to make sure that people they're hearing what we're saying by however we need to say it so that we can get the job done. And there's an excitement for me to learn it. And I had to make that a high priority. And so really, I'm working hard at learning right now than ever before. I'm talking to young guys to get their insights. I'm listening to podcasts all the time, reading everything I can read so that I can continue to be alive and alert and sharp and be able to connect with the people of today.
That's a very inspiring thing to share. And, for those who can actually see you on the screen, most of us are guessing 65, but that's not actually the case, is it?
Not quite. I'll be 86 in November.
That's totally amazing, and still a lifelong learner. And that's so inspiring.
Well, it just is absolutely necessary. That's all I'll say about that, but it's critical.
Anchored and rooted in the truth, but not stuck in the mud, still growing.
Exactly.
And learning.
And that can be fun.
Oh, yes, absolutely. What practices or rhythms help you endure the inevitable challenges and setbacks of long-term ministry? What were some of the spiritual disciplines and areas that you sowed into your life to maintain a healthy leadership over the years?
Well, I think it was being around other leaders was a big factor. Always trying to learn from other leaders, picking the brains of other leaders, associating with other leaders, and also going to conferences to as much as seemed reasonable. Now, I know that there are people who that's about all they do is go to conferences, and they're looking for the silver bullet, and they're never going to find it, because the silver bullet is each one of us doing what we need to do and learning what we need to learn, and I think much of that, and meeting with people who are always doing far better than I was, and hearing their thoughts, and they're getting their insights and being inspired by what they were doing. And I think it comes to mind right now that I rejoiced even in this city when I saw a church going forward, any church that was doing well. I just couldn't imagine how you could be jealous of some of the churches doing better than yours. How could you not rejoice if you are truly all about wanting to see more people get to heaven?
Which is a kingdom perspective of ministry.
It really is.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think when we get to heaven and we look at the masses around us, and particularly those from our own communities, we will probably look back and reflect on the days of working together as local churches as the highest moments in our experience on earth.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how do you discern the difference between persevering through difficulty and recognizing when it's time for a change?
Well, you used a great word there, persevering. And I feel like so many people okay, let me put it this way. We in ministry have got it made from this perspective. When we want to give up and we don't want to deal with the problems and we want to move on, we can just rationalize, I just feel the Lord wants me to move on. I feel it's the Lord's will that I should go. And so much of the time, in my opinion, has nothing whatsoever to do with the Lord's will. It's just not wanting to face the music. And here's the thing. If we can persevere, then we can see problems resolved. Now, we had this polarization. And I've never heard tell of a church that had the polarization that we had ever get back on his feet under the same ministry. But if the same ministry can continue and everything get resolved, the problems that caused the polarization get resolved, nobody wants to go back there again. And everybody wants to work together. And so you've got a much stronger situation. But when somebody comes up against some issues and they interpret that, I guess it's time for me to move on, and those issues don't get resolved, they just go on to another place where they find some other issues that are similar, maybe somewhat different, but they're still issues that cause them to want to move on. And so nothing gets resolved. The person that follows that person, they come up against those issues again because they haven't got resolved. And so here's what concerns me a bit in today's world. 100 years ago, everybody had it hard. And today we've all got it so easy comparatively with what it was 100 years ago. And we think it needs to be easy in ministry, and it ain't ever going to be working with people. And I was feeling sorry for myself at one point because of pushback and polarizing. And by the way, when there's polarization, objectivity goes out the window, truth goes out the window, and everybody's just seeing it from their perspective. So I sat down and I read the whole book of Nehemiah in one setting. And after reading that book of Nehemiah and seeing what Nehemiah went through when he had everybody opposed to him, even people in his own team opposed to him, and his answer was, what God put in my heart to do, we're going to do it. And his answer was, we will arise and we will build. After I read the book of Nehemiah and that saying, I thought, you poor wimp, get with the program, wake up, put some, you've had it, you can't have it that easy. And so and by the way, during those times when we were going through the worst difficulties, I was getting the greatest calls to other places and salaries that were twice as what I was getting. As an example, I got a call to our largest church in our denomination in San Diego, California. I hate snow. And San Diego, the weather is perfect out there. And I was at my worst time. I was battle worn, battle weary, wanted to get out of here. I would go outside sometimes to speak and dread coming back, but I just knew I had to be here. But anyway, I gave in. I went out there, met with their board, and I remember the next day just feeling terrible. This is not for me. And even the snow looked good to me back home. And I called them and said, look, I'm not your man. But then they called John Maxwell. You would probably know that name. And he took over the church, and it just boomed under his leadership, which was the right thing. But I think there's a great need for people who will be strong and persevere, not give up. That's my answer.
And that's such a good word. And I've been to Moncton in the middle of the winter when you've got those snow blowers going. And I remember a winter walking up a driveway and the snowbanks were much taller than I was. So I bet you California was pretty tempting at that time.
Was it ever? Was it ever? But interesting. A few years ago, I had somebody come by here in the summertime, and they said to me, do you remember me? And I looked at I couldn't quite place them. They said, well, we were here 30 years ago to try to get you to come to our church in California. And then this man went on to say, he said, we would give our right arm to have a facility like this. And I thought, well, boy, that's pretty vindicating that the decisions to stick by the stuff, work through the problems, break the barriers, go on to the next levels. It must have been the right decision.
So looking back, what are the biggest blessings you've seen from committing to the long haul in one community?
I would say the biggest blessing, of course, is to see the number of people come to know Christ and the hundreds and hundreds of baptisms that took place as a result, and the lives changed, and the church, as probably you know, grew into the largest church in Atlantic Canada, and it's the largest auditorium. Not that that is important; those things are not there, but it's what that means as far as changed lives. That's what it is all about, and that's what has to be remembered. But not only that, part of my vision was I just saw so many places, and this relates to some of the other questions you've asked as well, was what I had seen and heard about historically over the last 100 years or so was a church would emerge maybe to become one of the most outstanding churches in the area. The pastor would get a call to greener pastures, and he would go on to those greener pastures, and then the church would never go on from there. And I thought, Atlantic Canada has got to have somebody, even though it was very presumptuous on my part, and I felt embarrassed by it all really at the time, to stick to the stuff, see it through, so that it can create a believability that as great of things as great things can happen in Atlantic Canada as great as any other place in North America. It just needs leadership. And so we determined that we're going to keep breaking the barriers. But here's the exciting thing about that. I thought maybe this will create believability, help others to believe, because we've got this mentality in Atlantic Canada. It can happen everywhere else, but it can't happen here, not only in the church world, that's in the secular world as well. And so I saw no reason why it couldn't happen here in Atlantic Canada just as well as it could happen anywhere else. And one of the things that's been most gratifying to me is to have so many pastors of the churches that have broken the barriers say it's because of what we saw happen in Moncton that caused us to believe and have the courage and stick by the stuff in order to see happen what we're seeing happen. And that is one of the most rewarding things that you could ever imagine. It's been worth it.
Well, we've got about 3 minutes left, and I'd like to ask you this question. It's often been said there's nothing larger than the local church. What does that phrase mean to you?
Well, that's an interesting question, but I think it means to me probably its impact if it's done the way it should be done, and if it has I hate to say this in one way, but I feel like not to say it is to be deceiving. It takes leadership. It really does. All through the Bible, everything you saw that God did, it was through somebody who was willing to pay the price of being a leader. And this may seem like a fanatical statement to some people, but I think any church situation that is dead in the water could be turned around with the right kind of leadership. And that entails an awful lot when you say the right kind of leadership, given time. Stick by the stuff and pay the price.
Dr. Laurel Buckingham, Moncton, New Brunswick. Laurel, it's been great to have you part of the program today. And I'm looking forward to our next interview, because if you tune in for the next week's program, you're going to hear Dr. Buckingham again in a conversation that I know will be encouraging to you. So until next time, we'll see you on The Healthy Christian Leader. Well, today's conversation was fantastic, but we're not finished yet. We'll be back in the next video with the same guest with more discussion about leader health. You know the drill. Subscribe and hit that bell. Would you join us for the next episode? You can find new episodes every week in video form on the Aaron Ministry YouTube page and in audio form as the Healthy Christian Leader Show wherever you get your podcasts. Aaron Ministries is an interdenominational network of friends in ministry with a mission to foster healthy Christian leaders. Check out our website, aaronministries.com, for more resources and information on how to donate or to start a healthy Christian leader gathering in your area. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.